Again, thank you for the three of you for joining what has become an annual event now with the webinar of advancing your career in tax. Dave, Wayne, it's nice to see you again for the second time, and Walter, thank you for joining for the first time. For those that don't know, Wayne is the current global head of tax at Visa. If you want to do a very brief introduction, Wayne, to yourself.
Sure. Wayne Monfries. I'm the Senior Vice President for Global Tax at Visa. In a couple of weeks, I'll be here for 6 years. Started during the pandemic. It's been a great run. Prior to Visa, I was at TransUnion, where I was head of tax in Chicago, and I was head of tax at Nike in Portland, Oregon.
Perfect, thank you. And Dave, the CEO of Global Tax Management, again, second time here, second year in a row, right? You were here last year.
Yep. Yeah, that's correct.
Thank you
Thanks,
again,
Zach.
sir.
Yeah, so I'm Dave Sikola. I will be on my laptop in a minute. I apologize to everybody. I'm on my phone due to a update that ran unexpectedly. But I've been with GTM for about 20 years. We are a tax-only consulting firm, mainly focused on, I would say, upper middle market to large cap market. And prior to joining GTM, I was at GlaxoSmithKline and a company called Smiths Group, so both UK companies, and then started my career in public with the firm that is now part of Wipfli.
Perfect, thank you. And both clients of mine as well from an in-house perspective. So nice little link there. And Walter, last but definitely not least, I'll let you do an introduction, and then obviously current president of the TEI as well. So if you want to give a little update and introduction to the TEI as well, that'd be great.
Sure, I'd be glad to. My name is Walter Doggett. I serve as the Chief Tax Officer for First Horizon Bank. So we're a super regional bank headquartered in Memphis, Tennessee. I think we're the 30th largest bank in the country. I actually work hybrid. I live in Baltimore and fly out to Memphis 1 week a month to spend time with my team out there. I've been with First Horizon only about 2 years. Previously, I served as the head of tax at 4 different banks, all of whom were acquired, unfortunately. And so it forced me to keep moving. So this is the 5th bank that I've served in this role over a period of about 26 years. So that definitely developed a specialty in the bank tax area, and it's a practice area I really enjoy a lot.
Great. And then if you want to give a little introduction to those that don't know about the TEI as standing president, it's become a little bit of a tradition to do a pitch for that as well.
I would love to. And Wayne is a former TEI president as well. But I currently have the sincere honor of serving as the TEI international president. The Tax Executive Institute, based in Washington, we have about 7,000 members worldwide. I'd say about 20% of our members are outside the United States, so it truly is a global organization. We organized among 55 chapters, 11 regions, have a whole host of continuing education opportunities at the chapter, regional, and we have 2 national conferences we have twice a year. Also tremendous networking opportunities. We've also got a A+ legal staff in Washington that responds to a lot of advocacy efforts, filing amicus briefs, responding to proposed regulations. Hands down, it is clearly the leading organization for corporate tax professionals. So service providers are not allowed, public accountants. So unfortunately, Dave can't join, but it's just exclusively in-house tax professionals. But if you're not a member, I'd strongly encourage you to look into membership. It's very affordable, and you'll get many times more out of TEI than the nominal membership fee. And it truly is. It's been one of the highlights of my career, being associated and having the opportunity to briefly lead TEI.
Yeah, no, and having spoken at it, and I'm speaking again in the Orlando conference in a couple of months' time. Highly recommend people get involved. It's a great place to be, and some of the connections you make there. kind of forms lifelong friendships and mentorships and stuff like that. So yeah, highly recommend that. We'll jump into some of the questions now. If any of the audience have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and we will be leaving kind of 5-10 minutes, depending on the amount that we have in there, available for answering those questions from the esteemed panel. Wayne, I'm going to kick off with you on the first question, if that's okay. In terms
Sure.
of how should professionals think about specializing when it comes to their experience, rather in terms of broadening experience or specializing in, say, state tax? Is there
Yeah.
a difference when it comes to building that long-term career?
Well, I think you have to look at what you want to do. You can do a lot of different things. I never thought I'd be head of tax. I actually never thought I'd be an international tax person. Actually, don't think I'm an international tax person, although people say I am. So it really depends on what your career path looks like. I started out doing audit, then I went to corporate tax, then I did personal financial planning. Then I went to state tax, then I did federal tax, then I went abroad to do international. I remember the conversation when I went abroad. I said, well, I haven't done international tax. And the person said, well, you understand taxes and that foundation will apply to all tax. So I felt I was a generalist. When I was doing international tax, I kind of fell into that and was doing that a lot. And then ended up with a role. My first role at Nike was leading international tax. So I've worked in all the different areas. Um, and people are going to put you in whatever bucket that they think, but you have to just keep looking out. Where do I want to be 5 years from now? Where do I want to be in each 5 years, and saying, what experiences do I need to get? When I finally determined I wanted to become a head of tax, I knew I needed to get international. I knew I needed to make sure I had the tax accounting and provision work there, and the policy work. So you get into all the different things, but you can also be a specialist, and there's a lot of value in being a specialist. It really just depends on where you want to go with that.
Yeah, I agree. And you've had a fascinating career when you look at, kind of zoom out and look at the travel and where you started. So congratulations, it's very impressive. Dave, your thoughts
Sure.
on this?
Yeah, I think when you're starting out your career, the more exposure you can get to everything involved in your career path, the better you'll be served. I always stress with people to try to be a continuous student. And sometimes even like, especially when you're earlier in your career, if something doesn't fit in the box properly, still go for it, because the experience can really drive as you advance your career. When you start to specialize, a lot of that broad, as Wayne mentioned, generalist background comes into play because if you were doing international tax, but you were exposed to provision, you might be able to, drive the sensitivities between what you're trying to achieve, maybe from, cash savings or other areas of strategic, process, but also bring it back to all those other areas such as the effective tax rate and controls and things like that. So my advice to everybody is, especially when you're earlier in your career, try to get exposed to as much as possible. And then as you specialize, try to draw those experiences back to making you a more strategic and valuable player on your team.
Yeah. And Walter, your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with Dave. And Wayne. I think having as many touch points as you possibly can early in your career, putting a toe in the water and doing a little bit of federal, a little bit of state, having some controversy back experience on your resume is helpful. I've never worked for a multinational firm really, so I never had the opportunity to gain, the deep international experience that Wayne has. But you'll eventually find an area where you've got a passion, and you need to build upon that passion. And I think at some point you need to specialize in something in your career and have an expertise. But at the same time, if you want to become a head of tax like Wayne and myself, you need to have a broad base of knowledge. And so having, some time in federal, some time in IRS audits, some time in state, as I have in my career, and obviously tax accounting is critically important if you're going to lead a tax department. You got to be able to, get the provision correct. So, having a broad-based background, I think will help you learn what you want to specialize in, and it'll also help prepare you to lead a tax department if you've got some basic familiarity in the key tax areas.
Yeah, I think it's vitally important if you want to continue to climb the ladder to where you guys get to, is to continually add on to the skill set and add on to, add the strings to the bow, as it were. And it can be quite difficult, and we see it here definitely, where salary and stuff like that come into play as you get junior. My advice to everyone, and feel free to correct me if you disagree with this, but my advice to everyone at the junior level is just get the experience. The salary will come. Yeah, that extra 5,000, 10,000, whatever is great as you're climbing the ranks, but it'll pay off in dividends in the future when you get to 20, 25 years in your career, and you've had that exposure to more all-round stuff, rather than arguing over 5 grand on the base when you're 3 years in. It seems, at the end of the day, seems a little bit silly, from a long-term perspective, but I appreciate that can be quite hard at times. Dave, second one for yourself to kind of open with. What guidance would you give someone when they're shifting from CPA to in-house, in terms of, is there a right time? Should you stick? Should you twist? What are the pros and cons? You've obviously done both and gone back. So intrigued on your thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say for someone that's, considering going back to, or going maybe to, the corporate world, think about what your goals are, because it also depends on the type of organization you'll select. So what I always tell people is, if you're working for a good firm, make sure you're leaving for a good company or good job. But even when you do that, I think one of the I would say trends that we all have when we're younger is you feel like you're missing out on work-life balance, but you can go to a corporate environment and really broaden your horizons. So, for argument's sake, you might get better work-life balance, but you may also get more consistent and effective exposure. So, if I looked at my tax background, my career, I went from public to private or to corporate, and ultimately got into the controllers organization. I got into some of the business ops organizations. I got into some of the strategic M&A areas. So you do have a lot of opportunities if you go with the right organization. And the nice thing about that world is, sometimes it comes at a fast pace, sometimes it comes at a slow pace, but there's usually a very consistent pattern to doing that. And so the type of organization you select, can help you achieve goals. And then going back to that continuous student world, I would always say, I'm wearing my Flyers jersey today because of, we're in the playoff hunt. But go where the puck takes you, or go where the puck is heading, not where, it's at right now. And, if it takes you into controllership or something else, go for it.
Great. Thank you. Walter, your thoughts on timing
Yeah.
and stick and twist?
Yeah. First of all, I'm a big fan of starting your career in public accounting. I did myself at KPMG, and I've got a strong bias. I rarely hire people that do not have public accounting experience, because it shows me they've been trained well. It's the best place to start your career. The diversity of experiences and the client experiences are really invaluable. Got a little bit of a unique perspective. I teach part-time at Loyola University, Maryland. It's a Jesuit school in Maryland, and been teaching 16 years now, and still keep in touch with a lot of my former students. And I think the hardest decision they make, 5 years into their career, is, when do I leave public accounting? It seems like, 99% will. I personally think a lot of my former students are leaving public accounting too early today. I think they're jumping ship before they really get the true maximum benefit that public accounting offers, the diversity of experiences, the amount of training that the firms invest into you. And I encourage my former students to try to hang on until they make manager in public accounting, because once you make manager in public, you can almost always translate that to a manager position in the corporate world. So I think not jumping ship too soon is something I strongly recommend. And I think a lot of times that will maximize your career potential. I think you'll get a greater boomerang into the corporate world if you stay a few extra years in public accounting.
Great, thank you, Wayne.
Yeah, I'd follow on with that. Um, and when you make manager, then each year you're in that seat is a more accelerated pace to get a more senior role in the corporate world. So yeah, definitely stay there and until you're ready to jump and for the right job. I mean, I think David said it best. Don't leave a good job for a bad company. So always be clear there. What I would say, some advice for people who are looking to leave public accounting is don't go in the interview and say I'm looking to kind of work less and
Yeah,
I get it, it's work life balance. I've been in public accounting. I led the department in overtime 1 year. That's something you only want to do once. So don't come in the interview with that, because I would say, like, okay, so it's not necessarily going to be easy here. I do believe in work life integration, and I don't want people working on holidays and weekends and all the like, but it kind of says, it gives a sense of message to your interviewer about what you're really trying to get to. So I'd give you that advice. But I think I'd look for people, as Walter said, who have public accounting experience because of that very point. I think the work ethic is there, and people who are willing to get in and do the work. I think you value more.
are you kind of add-on question that I didn't send to you pre-meeting, and I could just come to me. Are you looking at, because historically it's always been Big Four, right? Has been the kind of the go-to when it comes to hiring at that kind of analyst, senior analyst manager, senior manager levels. Are you seeing a shift from that, from what you're looking for, because of the outsourcing model that the Big Four are implementing, and those more junior people coming through aren't necessarily getting as in the weeds as yourselves were kind of coming through?
I wouldn't say that. I think I like the people who are doing the outsourcing work because they're bringing tools and experiences that help make us more efficient if we choose to keep it in-house. And I think it's, whether it's Big Four or I don't know, some of the other firms are all merging and they're creating their own big next tier level. I mean, it's just the experiences that they have and what tools are you bringing. I think we'll talk about AI and software and all that in the future, but I think those doing outsourcing work are bringing best practices that are very helpful.
What are your thoughts,
Yeah,
Walter?
I could probably just
Oh,
add
sorry.
something quickly on that. A lot of times when you're doing outsourcing, it's more of that operational tax work. Usually it's higher volumes. It may have a little bit more of a, we'll call it like a grind to it. And so to Wayne's comment, typically the folks that are sort of in the trenches on that work, they learn how to do it faster. They learn how to do it quicker. They learn how to, so they bring that, again, that process with them, that kind of says, hey, if this is something that takes a lot of time internally, they probably have already done that at 5 or 6 different clients. And one thing I always tell people, I remember when I was younger, if there was a job that I was given that was like, again, we'll call it the daily grind type thing, where it was just lots of work, I figured out how to do it quicker. So
Yeah. What are your thoughts, Walter?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, at one point in my career, I would say I had a Big Four bias, but now, I really look for people that have solid work experiences in public accounting. The two most recent hires I've made at First Horizon, both at the senior level. One came out of RSM, the other one came out of Fortis, and they've been great employees for me. So, I look for just quality experiences in public accounting. I think some of the second tier and regional firms provide some excellent career opportunities. And I don't necessarily have a Big Four bias per se, but I do have a strong preference for public accounting. And going back to the previous question, one point I would emphasize, when I talk to my former students and they call me and they got a job opportunity, they want to run it by me. One thing that I emphasize to them is don't chase the money, chase the opportunity.
Yep.
Don't tell me you're getting a $5,000 or $10,000 raise, and that's the sole reason that you're leaving. I mean, in 20 years from now, that'll be laughable. So, I would only leave public accounting if you've got a worthwhile opportunity in the corporate world. That's something you're really passionate about, where you've got, some promotional opportunities as well. So, the money will come, as you said before, Jack. And so always chase the opportunity first.
yeah, the money will come further down the line. If you get the first few moves correct, it'll all kind of fall into place. And yes, on the topic of in-source, outsource that we kind of briefly discussed with the big four and public accounting firms there, what are you seeing in terms of the pros and cons of that, Walter, and what the trends are? 'Cause it feels like a bit of a pendulum sometimes, where it's kind of
It
the
does.
trend of one or the other.
Yeah, it swings back and forth, and it's definitely swinging in the favor of the public accounting firms right now. And it seems like every quarter there's another large company in TI that where their entire tax department's basically been outsourced to a public accounting firm, and I kind of hate to see it. I When I got to First Horizon, our compliance was outsourced, and I actually brought it back in-house. And my argument was I think I can do it cheaper. I think I can do it faster. I think I can do it better if I have the employees. And so I'm a big fan of bringing it in-house. And I like having the control. I'm not going to name my service provider, but I remember I got 10 state returns dumped on my lap 5 days before the due date last year, and I had no time to review those, and this year we'll get those state returns done months earlier and we'll all review them. I think, it's a better process, but it's real. It's happening. I think AI is definitely going to help accelerate some of the outsourcing. And it's a cost benefit analysis. I mean, it looks beneficial today from a CFO's perspective, but the costs gradually increase. And 5 years from now, you're at the point where it's like, wow, how much are we paying these people? I could hire a whole department for what I'm paying them, and let's bring it back in-house. But I think AI is going to be a game changer, and I specifically think compliance is definitely at risk
Yeah.
in the corporate world. I think 5, 10 years from now, very few of us are going to be doing compliance in-house. I personally think it's going to be outsourced to the firms, and the firms are going to be using AI to do compliance. And I don't think it's going to eliminate all tax jobs by any means, but I think there are some specific roles in corporate tax that I think are well suited for AI to have a meaningful impact.
Great, thank you. And Wayne, your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of things that Walter's talking about, and I really think it depends on where your tax department is. I think the outsourcing certainly is in compliance, because I think the tax accounting is the biggest thing that we own. That's the data that comes out of the department. That is our voice. I don't think that will be outsourced. I wouldn't outsource it for what I do. For compliance, yeah, there are tools out there that can make it more efficient, and the firms probably have that. And I say really where your tax department is depending on what investment you can get. You can either bring those tools in-house, those same tools, or you need to outsource because the tools are there. And if your CFO says, I can't invest in the technology to get you the tool, then I'd say, well, I probably am going to be better off outsourcing that piece of work because they'll have better tools and can be more efficient. And then be prepared for the CFO down the road to have the question of, are we getting any savings from our service providers for all those tools that they're providing? So it comes full circle, but it really kind of depends on where you're at. My personal view is having a department and where you can develop people and have people grow and give people different experiences is very, very important, with regard to keeping your people there, not having attrition, and feeling like you're managing a person, and not a thing.
Yeah, perfect. And Dave, other side of the coin. What are you seeing, and what are your thoughts? And
Yeah.
Wayne kind of touched on tech as well. You've got your own
So,
stack.
so being, so being on the service provider side, we do see a good amount of outsourcing and co-sourcing. Co-sourcing being more of the just-in-time resource or the part-time resource or the seasonal surge resource. One of the things that drives that, in a lot of cases, as Wayne was alluding to, is probably more like, right off the bat, we have a shortage of professionals in the industry. So you have a business continuity need. You also have, situations where maybe the role is not a perfect career path for where the organization is in its life cycle. So it may not be something that they risk a lot of turnover with. And then I would say the last one is it's sort of again where you want to put your investment dollars. There may be parts of the business that you might say, hey, this is probably better for an outsource. We can keep the department a little leaner, tighter, and maybe more overall internal advancement for those personnel if some of these things are not on their plate. But I would say the trend is, somewhere between that co-source and outsource. The outsource is usually, you'll see certainly a lot of global activities, compliance, maybe indirect tax areas, and sometimes provision. And the co-sourcing world is probably more specific to whether the company is somewhere in a life cycle of maybe globalization or, new products or something that, they might need, a triage as they ramp up or ramp down.
Okay. Great. Yeah, I think it's definitely a pendulum that seems to be ever swinging, as you've all kind of alluded to. And when you kind of touched on AI earlier, and Walter obviously mentioned it in the last kind of question, how is your tax function, Wayne, adopting automation and AI, to manage the rising complexity? And are there any limitations that you're seeing right now from using the tools?
Yeah, so every company is pushing the use of AI, and everybody wants to see, what resources you can save by implementing those tools. I say that, we're not going to lose our jobs to AI. We're going to lose our jobs to people who know how to use AI. And so you do need to implement the tool to become more efficient. One of the things I'm very proud of this because we started a quarterly CFO award for departments or AI projects within the global finance team here. So we won the first one in tax, and that was a nice moment for me to award that.
Congratulations.
But they were using AI to basically we've input all of our data for IDR responses, and so the agent can actually get an IDR, get a question from a state authority, look for a similar response to that we've done in the past based on the keywords in there, and then draft an initial response. And then we go in and we review it and we adjust it for the moment, and we're able to send it off much more quickly, much more efficiently than in the past. And we ensure that we have a consistent story that we're telling to everyone, and for the reasons and the basis and the background. So great project, and it really the limitation is about loading the data. The bot is only going to be as good as the data you put in it. So you have to invest time up front, and I think that's the limitation: getting people to take the time to build the bot in a way that is going to be effective. And if you don't have that time, and that's your barrier, then you're going to be stuck.
Makes sense. Dave, how are you implementing it
Yeah.
within the firm?
Yeah, I think, just like many firms and many companies, we're, heavily, focused on it and invested in it. What I would say is, Wayne, hit the bullseye on the idea of like, just with any technology, if you try to ignore it, it's probably gonna surpass you and inundate yourself. So you do have to learn, how to adapt to it, adopt it, and move forward with it. What I would say is probably the one limitation that we're seeing, just on a macro basis, which will probably be short term, is probably more just around security and policies of the usage of AI. Like bigger companies want to make sure they understand, like, are you just throwing their data out there that other ecosystems are now, getting potential proprietary information or sensitive information, and how you're doing that and how you're safeguarding. I think that'll be a short-term issue. But what I will tell you is there are a lot of companies as well as service providers really focused on their AI usage policy. So to make sure that they're being very diligent in how they're using these tools if they're in an external ecosystem environment.
Okay,
Yeah,
perfect. And
great
Walter.
point.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with both comments. And I work for a bank, so I'm in a highly regulated industry. So we are not allowed to use ChatGPT, and our company has developed its own AI model. We call it Chat FHN. That's our ticker symbol for First Horizon. So we can only use that. And the bank's really concerned about, as Dave indicated, the confidentiality of our information and not having that be on the intranet rather than the internet. And so we're restricted on to what type of AI product we can use. But it's here to stay. I mean, this is not just one of those passing trends. I think AI is really going to be revolutionary, just like iPhones were, for
Yeah.
example. And I think you need to, make an investment. You need to use these. I sat through a presentation just a couple of weeks ago. Ahead of our investor relations is kind of the poster child for using Chat FHN at our company, and he indicated how we have, I think it was 22 analysts that follow our stock, and he's developed a bot for every one of those 22 analysts based on the questions that they typically ask him, the information that they're looking for. So whenever he gets a call from one of these investors, he can just call up their information on the bot and know exactly what their concerns and their interests are. And I thought that was a great use of AI and developing a bot. But you got to invest the time to make it an accurate bot like Wayne was indicating. And so it's an investment of time, but it can definitely pay off for you.
And is this the obviously you've mentioned kind of the compliance side of things may disappear over the next kind of 5 years. Is this something you feel like junior people need to be prioritizing in the next kind of wave of their own learning, to make sure that they are staying competitive in the market? I'm going to stay with you, Walter, if that's okay.
Yeah, I agree. I think, as Wayne indicated, I think it's AI is not going to eliminate all tax jobs. I don't think AI is going to eliminate a majority of the tax jobs. I think we're all going to be hesitant to outsource our tax accounting. I mean, that's really our key function. I think a lot of our planning requires human intelligence and knowledge of the business. So I think a lot of planning, audit defense, sitting across the table and negotiating with federal and state auditors, that's not something I think it's ideally suited for AI. So there's going to be some key roles. I think compliance is definitely in jeopardy. If you're a pure compliance person today, I think, over the next 5 years, you really need to seriously think about retooling and looking for some opportunities. Maybe there's some opportunities to stay in compliance and managing the AI compliance within your company, perhaps. But I think everyone's going to have a role and needs to embrace AI, especially people that are in a compliance role and looking how this is going to significantly change their jobs going forward, I believe.
Okay. And Dave, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think, as Walter said, I don't think it's going to eliminate jobs. What I do think it will do is give you a lot more responsibility, that you'll be able to do more of your department's functions using that tool. And when I talk about like AI and technology, I always use the idea of how technology advanced the aviation industry. If you go back and watch the movie Airplane, there's five people in the cockpit: co-pilot, engineer, communications officer, and navigator. And then today, any plane you fly, there's only two people. And in reality, they really probably only need one person. And probably in reality, some of those planes don't need any person. So you end up with more responsibilities. But when you think about it, what ended up happening, using aviation as an example, more planes were built, more routes were created, and there's still a shortage of pilots and everything in the aviation industry. So I don't think it's going to eliminate, but I do think it will probably add more responsibility to the person in the tax function.
Okay. Wayne, I'm assuming, feel the same way?
Yeah, yeah. David did a great job. I use an analogy as well in that my brother and my father both would consider themselves graphic artists, right? My father did graphic art in a very different way than my brother does graphic art, and the the profession changed due to automation, due to a lot of things. The next generation of tax professional will be doing their job very differently than the way we do our jobs today. So we got to embrace the change, embrace the technology, and ride with it. We still need to be strong tax professionals because again, the agentic data is only going to be as good as the person putting the data in and the person analyzing the data that comes out.
Yeah, I think it's everywhere, myself included. Needs to we need to embrace AI. I'm probably on the slower end of embracing it. There's a little bit of friction there for me personally, but I'll have to just get over that and kind of deal with it. In terms of Wayne, sticking with yourself, in terms of the continuing changes with regards to obviously the tariffs that came in, I want to say recently because it feels like forever ago, but it's also fairly recently, the new changes in that and just the global trade policy. How is that affecting your tax planning, your supply chain decisions, and how you're kind of logically thinking around it? Because it could all be different again in 2 years, 3 years, six
Yeah,
months. Like
so
who knows?
in for our supply chain, we'll use technology or services, but at the end of the day, the tariffs create a new landscape as governments look to defend themselves against tariffs, as governments look to raise more revenue from, in our case, the digital economy. Those things have an impact. And so, how do I do planning? I got to use the laws that are on the books now, and then I also have to make sure that our leadership is aware of other things that could come up in tax policy and lean into it strongly. I think Walter talked about TEI. A lot of organizations that do tax policy, we need to stay very close to. Tax policy is a role that didn't exist in the company when I started here 6 years ago, which exists now because we need somebody to have eyes on that around the world. So the current situation does make us look at what we're doing. We have to have exit strategies on our planning because the landscape can change at any moment with change in administrations, change in other policies that cause us to change our tax policy. So you got to be nimble. You got to have exit strategies, and you got to be aware of all the things that are going on.
Great. And that kind of leans into one of the questions that has been asked in the chat in terms of how you're keeping up to date with the new legislation and knowledge. Are you leaning heavily on the TEI and the connections you have there as well as your providers?
Yeah, so the providers always are gathering information. I lean into TEI. I lean into other groups with in-house tax professionals. We have a Silicon Valley tax group that does a lot of advocacy. So there's a no lack of information that we need that is available to us to follow. The question then becomes how you use it and how you set your company up for success with what's going on. We're actually are doing a bot that gathers all the emails that we get from the different sources about global tax policy, whether it be Pillar 2 or digital services taxes, to kind of summarize what we get each week and use that to identify what's impacting us and have a strategy.
That's really smart. That's really smart. Walter, yourself.
Yeah, I mean, going back to something Dave said earlier, I think you need to be a continuous learner throughout your entire career. And I probably spend, I'm an early morning person. I try to spend probably the first hour of every day just reading, going through the various federal, state, judicial updates that I get from a whole host of service providers, and also my online tax library with B&A Bloomberg. Your CFO is going to appreciate if you give them a heads up before they hear about something, and not only give them a heads up, but also tell them how this could impact our company positively or negatively. They want to know, okay? And they don't want to read about it in the newspaper and call you and ask how this is going to, you want to be ahead of the curve and be proactive. And I'd also encourage you to attend at least one seminar or conference a year. I think it's critically important to take time out of your busy day to listen to some of the experts in the field talk about trends and policy proposals. And also, organization like TEI can be very effective in that realm. you never want to go to a member of Congress or any policymaker individually. You have such little clout. But if you go as an organization, as TEI, with 7,000 members behind you supporting an issue, or as an industry coalition, the American Bankers Association or the American Bar Association, your clout is maximized. So taking advantage of some of these advocacy opportunities that exist within some of these larger organizations is a way you can directly impact proposed legislation, and that can be very meaningful to your company and meaningful to your industry.
Yeah, and obviously it doesn't just have to take the top person to be taking these issues to the CFO and such. If you're a senior analyst manager, I'm sure you would welcome someone on your junior staff kind of coming to you, Walter, being like, "Hey, I've read about this. What do you think about this?" And kind of bringing you the solutions. So don't just wait until you hit you know the top level to be doing that. I always look to try and go above and beyond where you are. Dave, how are you seeing it affect your clients, I guess, or are
Yeah.
you seeing it affect you guys internally as well, potentially?
Yeah, well, right off the bat, the question on staying aware, a couple of the strategies we always recommend. Walter's comment about reading an hour a day, we actually put that in every training, every time we do a non-manager training, because we're always trying to get our younger folks to get into the habit of staying on top of things that come out. So that's a great way to start. But one of the things we always recommend to clients is communicate with both their service providers or auditors about the communication channels of as things that are important to the organization are communicated up. Like the simple one is like all the big four put out monthly international tax bulletins to tell you what updates are coming. You can get a little more aggressive with those and get like some of the trade organizations or coalitions, as Walter mentioned, that can like kind of tell you what the chatter is. So specifically, when you start thinking about tariffs, and to Wayne's comment about being nimble, what is on the books today may not be on the books tomorrow, but sometimes you're able to get some insight as to where tomorrow's heading. So you have to be very fluid in your planning and your strategy to do that. So.
Okay, perfect. And then kind of continuing with the skill set and growth, we've kind of touched on it along the line with regards to compliance and stuff. Where are you seeing the most critical to be moving forward in modern tax departments? Is it cross border? Is it the technical tax? What area of focus would you recommend, Wayne? Well, Walter, sorry, you're first on the docket for this one.
Well, that's a tough question. I mean, at various times, all areas in the tax department have their day, so to speak, and all provide value. But well, if there's one thing that's going to get me fired in my current role is if I screw up our tax accounting. Okay, if I can't close the books timely and accurately, and we've got to go back and do a restatement, they're going to be looking for a new head of tax pretty soon. And so that's probably my biggest risk area, is having a really good compliance team that knows what they're doing, that are technically competent, that can get the information they need, have the tools they need to process it, and can work with our external auditors to answer any questions. So, I don't want to minimize the federal and state compliance. It's critically important, but if I screw something up on the compliance side, I got 3 years to file an amended return. So I can't file an amended provision. I've got to get it right the first time. So that's probably the area that if I had to prioritize any areas, the most critical. And I'm not going to say most meaningful. I mean, all areas are meaningful, but the one where I have the greatest risk factor, hands down, is going to be my tax accounting area.
Okay. Dave.
Yeah, I would say one of the things that I feel is becoming less of or how do I say it, kind of a dying art is research in general. So whether it's tax accounting research or if it's the tax technical code, I think more and more of people are relying on either other sources or AI tools and things like that. I remember like starting my career with like using, there were paper books, right? So you had to learn how to read. There were probably more tax books than there were encyclopedias at that time, and you had to learn how to navigate it. So when the CD-ROM came out, that was like AI. It was like all of a sudden, but when you learn to research and learn to navigate, you actually learned how to teach yourself to learn. And so it becomes critically important that you know how to look something up, research it, read it, and come to a conclusion, and not just rely on maybe something that is giving you an answer based on how you asked it. So I do think that's a critical area in tax that I think there's a lot of opportunity, especially for people coming up in their career.
Perfect. And Wayne, before we kind of jump onto a couple of questions we've got, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm gonna agree and double down on everything that was said, but I'm going to take us in a different direction because I believe that the technical tax is foundational. Like you just have to have that, or you're not going to be successful. You'll be doing something different, and you got to
Yep.
be able to analyze it. And whatever comes out of the agent, you got to be able to analyze. In cross-border planning, I always say there's there's no good planning if you get the accounting wrong. So I hear you, and that's the most important thing. But the piece that we miss as tax professionals is the communication skill, the ability to take something very technical and explain it to people who don't do what we do. Um, that ability is lost on a lot of very technical people, and you really, really have to value that skill to be able to talk to a CFO or to a board or just to your accounting team about why this transaction or this compliance that we have to do is important. Make sure you have the communication down. The bot's not going to is going to spit out a draft for you, but you still got to be able to relate that to your company, relate it to your audience. And so having that communication skill is something you should lay in on as well.
Yeah, I could not agree more with that. The communication and soft skills are vitally important and something that not a lot of people put as much emphasis on as they probably should do going through kind of the grades, as it were. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and Jack, if I could add on, I mean,
Yeah,
just to
go for it.
echo the point Wayne made a minute ago about tax planning, from my seat, our CFO is never going to go out of, their way to congratulate me for getting the tax returns done timely and accurately, and they're never going to go out of their way to congratulate me for closing the books timely and accurately. And if you want to be head of tax, how you really earn that role, how you stay in that role is really providing value, okay, to your CFO. And when I say value, I mean tax planning. So, and that goes back to research to alert and staying on top of current events, but looking for opportunities. Here's an opportunity for us that would directly impact the bottom line, or whether it's taking advantage of bunching our charitable contributions together like we did last year with the One Big Beautiful Bill, or looking at tax credits or the R&D credit. And there's a whole host of but that is what catches the CFO's eye, is this person not only doing the blocking and tackling, but they're adding true value. They're impacting the bottom line of the company. And that's what someone's going to look for, most importantly, I think, for a head of tax.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I can attest to that. I've done a number of number one succession plan or replacement hires in the last 18 months, and every single one, without exception, has been either someone's retiring and they are doing the compliance and they want someone to add value, or they're getting rid of someone who is just doing the compliance and they want to add someone to come in and add value. So absolutely spot on with that, Walter. Yeah, that is a huge area of focus now across the C-suite, and kind of talking around touching on the C-suite there. One of the questions that we've got here is, as a head of tax, how do you branch out to other areas in finance, specifically treasury, accounting, CFO? And I'm assuming that Ari means evolving their career and moving into that. I'm seeing a trend of head of tax and treasury. There has been a slow procession of people moving into the C-suite. Do you guys open floor at this point now? Do you have any comments on how to best kind of position yourself?
I think once you
Go
get to a
ahead.
leadership role, um, you're leading a function, you're leading people, and if you can lead a function and you can lead people, then you can do other things. I mean, I think you see the natural combination of tax and treasury, but it could be tax and something else, right? Tax and trade is also very common, but it's really becomes about being a people leader. And if you can lead people, I always say that in this seat, I better not be the smartest tax person in the room when I meet with my team, right? They all have roles that they're focused on. They should be smarter, and I'm taking that, gathering it, and leading the function. So if we can get that skill, then you can take on other things.
I agree. You don't, especially if you're going from tax into treasury, you've not done treasury for 30 years. You've obviously seen it, and in tax you see a broad spectrum of the whole business, right? It's just natural, but you're not a treasurer by trade. So your treasury team is going to know, and hopefully anyway, will know way more than you do around the treasury side of things. So yeah, I agree with that. Wayne, Dave, any thoughts?
Yeah, I can just add. So the one thing that's interesting with tax is that it touches everything in the business. You start with GAAP, so you automatically have an opportunity to learn accounting and finance. The treasury is a major component of tax. You learn operations because if you're doing things like R&D credits or transfer pricing or whatever it may be, you have exposure to the entire business. So the key thing I would always say to people is, invest the time. So it might mean that your work week, if it's 40 hours, might have to be 50 hours. But the more you get exposed to those things, the more you broaden your career, the more you'll get opportunities. The other thing I always recommended there are a lot of times there's opportunities in corporate that are the job that's like it's going to be a tough job, right? There's a project, no one wants to do it. But you might learn a lot from it. It might be worth your investment. And, as much as it even might be painful, you're going to come out a better person on the other side and probably get appreciation for doing it as well. So I would say to tell people to try to invest that extra time or take that opportunity when it's there, or even speak up and say, "Hey, I'd like to give this a shot if there's a chance."
Okay. Walter, thoughts?
Yeah, I've been in this role. This is, my fifth bank that I've led, and consistently, I would say the three most important constituents that I have that I interact the closest with is going to be number one, the chief accounting officer, okay, because we get our information from accounting. Number two is the treasurer, and number three is the head of the legal department. I probably spend, two-thirds of my time interacting with those three individuals because their roles are so closely related to tax. But going back to adding value, I think it's important as head of tax to hold yourself out as a resource to the entire company. And so I interact quite frequently with business lenders, people that deal with employee benefits, stock offerings. The tax touches almost every line of business. And the more you can educate them and hold yourself out as a resource to help them do their jobs better. I rarely make it through 2 days without getting a call from someone in the company asking for my input and my tax expertise on an issue that they've got on their plate. And I enjoy doing that. I don't view that as a distraction. I view that as another area where I can really add value to the company is to be a resource for multiple departments and meet as many people as you can, interact with as many people as you can, and offer your services. If I can help you, reach out to me anytime. And you'd be surprised how many people will take the tax person up on that offer and call you.
Yeah, no, I think going above and beyond is critical in any stretch. We got a chap called Ryan who's joined in. Whose question is he's a tax attorney with a background in tax planning and business strategies for high net worth families. He's trying to transition into an in-house role. And from your perspective, are you seeing opportunities for tax attorneys within industry, particularly in strategic or advisory planning roles? And how would someone with his background, what would you recommend emphasizing on a resume to stand out to executives at your level?
I can just throw something out there. So especially when you're in the high net worth family world, there are significant numbers of large family businesses. I'm in the Philadelphia area. You have Clemens Food Group, you have Wawa, you have some very significant. Even I believe Bentley Systems is still has a lot of family ownership in it. One of the things that I think you can look at is the tax strategies of those organizations, between, the corporation, the foundation, the family trust, that'll give you the grounded, I would say almost like big corporate world of, where you can leverage everything that you've done over the years to then fill in any gaps that you have and then, move into, tax roles of almost any organization. So family offices, family businesses, or private owned businesses lend themselves to, quite a bit of expansion into all the other tax areas that you may decide that you want to endeavor on.
Perfect.
Haven't been one that worked as a personal financial planning for athletes and entertainers. I get it, and you can take your tax skills and apply them anywhere and continue to grow up the ladder. You can also go to a family office and run that, because there are a number of family offices out there with businesses. I also worked at Mars, so I private family business as well. So I think there's a lot of different paths you can take to take that experience, but you have all the options in the world.
I'm
Yeah,
assuming you agree, Walter?
yeah, I do. I rarely admit it, but I'm also an attorney. I generally hold myself, I generally hold myself out as an accountant or a CPA, and but when I hire somebody, I'm looking for someone with a solid tax background. I think there's definitely roles in tax for attorneys, specifically on the tax research side, on the tax planning side, dealing with IRS audits. There's a ton of legal issues in terms of procedure that you have to know and navigate through. So I think that's a great opportunity for attorneys as well as on the tax controversy area. But really, any role. I mean, if you've got a solid tax background, I don't think it limits you. I think it only helps you in your tax career. And don't be intimidated to take the plunge into the corporate world. And there's a lot of great opportunities for tax attorneys, as well as CPAs.
Great, cool. Thank you. And we got one last question from Zoe. We kind of touched upon earlier in the shortage of tax professionals. Her question is, do we see this trend reversing? And why? Why not? She's curious to hear senior professionals' opinion on the current shortage and why we are seeing this trend. Dave, you're in public
Sure.
accounting. I'll start with
Yeah,
you because that's
I
where all good
don't,
tax people need to
I don't,
start.
yeah, I don't see it reversing. If anything, I see it maybe continuing. Whether it accelerates or not is different. The reason is I feel like it's systematic. Colleges and universities to this day don't offer, a significant amount of tax courses. So, if we already have a shortage of accounting professionals. If you have less tax courses involved in the structure, you're probably exposed to it less. So I think just in the grand scheme of things, most of us kind of find our way through tax either through an internship, influence in our family or, in our lives, or, your first day of public accounting, they tell you to go to tax. So I don't know if it's going to really reverse in the near future. What I will tell you is the focus and importance that companies put on it is significantly bigger than when I started my career. The globalization, I mean, every year, every 4 years, whatever it is, there is a major tax issue that a company knows they have to tackle, and they put a lot of emphasis on, VP of tax, chief tax officer, as a key component of their leadership organization. So the opportunities to grow are exponential, and unfortunately, the shortage will probably continue.
Wayne, thoughts?
I agree 1,000%. People aren't getting into it; they don't see it as sexy, and then we get into it, and we find that we're value drivers for the CFO and for the company. So there's going to always be job opportunity if you lean this way.
And again, Walter, I'm assuming you agree
Yeah,
with
I
Wayne
agree
and Dave.
100%. It's funny how some people get into tax. I in college I was a finance major. I viewed accounting as boring with a capital B, and I didn't want anything to do with accounting. And I took two tax courses with a really extraordinary tax professor. He inspired me. After taking his classes, I knew exactly what I wanted to do the rest of my career. I wanted to be a tax professional, and I haven't regretted my decision. It's been an incredible ride, and in hindsight, I don't think I would have done anything differently. But the numbers are not in our favor. If you go on the AICPA website, the number of people taking the CPA exam continues to decline every year. Um, I'm teaching a 200 level course this semester for general, for all business majors. I've got 36 students, 18 of them are finance majors. I got two accounting majors. Finance is, as Wayne said, it's sexy. People view there's a lot more money in finance and it looks glamorous, but we haven't had a recession in a long time, really since, the Great Recession in 2008, 2010. And an important thing I tell my students is, if we do have a recession, I mean, the very first people are going to be cut are going to be the finance people. The very last people that are going to be cut are going to be the accountants, because no matter how bad things get, you still have to have audited financial statements. You still have to file tax returns. And so accounting is not recession proof, but accounting is definitely recession resistant.
Yeah.
And there's always going to be jobs and increasingly high paid jobs in the accounting field. So I still think it's a great career opportunity. And I think more students should be pursuing this path.
There you go. There's the LinkedIn snippet, isn't it, for the panel? Thank you very much, everyone, for joining and watching. Those that are in the background. Thank you to the esteemed panel for taking their time out. Wayne and Dave, thank you for the second time, and Walter, always a pleasure. Thank you for continuing the tradition of the current TEI president being involved. I will end there, and I hope you all have a very lovely rest of the day and rest of the week. And thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you for the
Thank you,
opportunity.
everybody. Take care. Take care.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.